Welcome everybody to the Apocalypse Chill Stream. I am Gary Machuda, live in Steubenville, Ohio, right outside the Franciscan University of Steubenville. It's great to have you with us. Again, it's another chill stream because unlike home where I have to talk very softly so I don't wake up the family, here I'm in the hotel and it's 3:30 in the morning and I don't want to wake up the guest. So gotta talk in soft tones, but hopefully you can hear me fine. In fact, let me make sure my mic is all set. Yep. And welcome aboard. So we're going to be talking about a couple of interesting little tidbits in Romans. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun today. Um, and welcome aboard, Reason Belief. It's good to see you. Everything is well. You know what, my friend? I'm sorry I missed the live book launch you had yesterday. Um, I just got here in Steubenville, and just one thing happened after another. I didn't even get to the hotel till late, and it was just pretty crazy. So I'm going to have to watch it though. I saw Sam was on, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, I wish I could have made it. I was hoping everything would work out fine, but it didn't. But congratulations on the launch of your new book. That's exciting. Uh, oh yeah. Here, let me. Sorry, I gotta get used to doing this in this weird environment. It's unlike home. It's hot and cold here in the room, so I'm sweating and then freezing. Just can't get the right temp, and the seat I'm sitting in is really creaky too. So I might flip over on my back. So that'd be kind of fun for the live stream. At least get some action. But yes, it's been a while. Yes, my wife is doing remarkably well in her recovery. So thanks be to God and thank you for your prayers. The prayers have been incredibly effective. She's still in a lot of pain, but she's, I think, a little bit ahead of the game as far as recovering from the surgery. By the way, for those who don't know, she about a week ago had knee replacement surgery. So the surgery went well. Her recuperation has been great. It was pretty rough for the first week as far as getting sleep and helping her. And she was in a lot of pain even with meds. But I think it's slowly starting to get under control. She's doing a lot by herself now. And so thanks be to God. Yeah. Thank you for asking. So thank you so much for your prayers and truly appreciate it. I know she does. And I appreciate it as well. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Try to think, as usual, like, subscribe, hit the bell. We are coming up on yet another milestone in terms of subscriptions. You could be the one to put us over the top. So if you haven't subscribed, please consider it. And of course, like and do all that stuff. I have the link in the chat area to come on board if you'd like to talk with me. There was a question earlier from Hollywood Big Boss, our good friend. And Hollywood, if you want to come up on stage and explain, I think I understand what's going on as far as Goodspeed's book on the Apocrypha, which I've read a while ago. Yeah, I wasn't super impressed. He had a couple of interesting points. So Hollywood Big Boss said that he has an odd question. I picked up a copy of the Apocrypha by Edgar J. Goodspeed, which is back in 1958. In the intro to Second Maccabees claims that Fourth Maccabees is not in the Apocrypha. And he continues, that being said, what classification do the other books, such as Third and Fourth Maccabees, have? They're not among the Apocrypha. The commentary is so weird. I would love to be able to send you screenshots. Um, I don't know if that's necessary, although it would be helpful to actually read the context, what's going on. Technically speaking, there is no definition of Apocrypha. So Protestants have all sorts of different books in the Apocrypha. For example, Luther, in his German translation, the Apocrypha consisted only of the 7 books affirmed by Trent with the addition of the Prayer of Manasseh. So elsewhere in Protestantism, it's more expansive. Sometimes it could include 3rd and 4th Maccabees, sometimes it doesn't. So there is no set list of Apocrypha. And that's generally true with other things too, like Apostolic Fathers. Sometimes some fathers are included amongst the Apostolic Fathers, like Papias or Papias. Other times it's not. And that's because there wasn't a council that said these are the books of the Apocrypha. And that's kind of the way it's used for Protestants is kind of nebulous. It's kind of a one size fits all category. So yeah, so Goodspeed says it's not part of the Apocrypha. That's interesting. Not sure why though. Third Maccabees is, Third and Fourth Maccabees are strange books because for Third Maccabees really doesn't have anything to do with the Maccabean revolt. So it's unlike First and Second. It's called Third Maccabees just because it follows First and Second Maccabees. Fourth Maccabees is more of a philosophical treatise based on the Maccabean martyrs in Second Maccabees. So I don't know if that figures in with Goodspeed. Don't know. So yeah, so thanks for the question. I don't know if that helped you very much with it, but I guess I would have to look at Goodspeed and see how he defines Apocrypha and where he's getting his information from. Let's see. Got another question. The question reminds me, do you know any resource that speaks about where Third Maccabees is excerpted from, or if it has a relation to Second Maccabees source? I wonder if I could look it up really quick. Let me check here. You guys are making me do work this early in the morning. Let's see here, which is great. Wakes me up. There is a commentary on Third Maccabees. That doesn't look like it. This might be it. I'm just looking at my logos really quick. Is this it? I have a feeling this is not it. I wonder why. See, I'm on my laptop and I'm not sure if my logos has the exact same library as my logos at home. There's a recent commentary on Third Maccabees who the person who made it is very enthusiastic about it. Yeah, I believe he's a Protestant. And he kind of goes overboard, I think, with the reception of Third Maccabees in the early church. I wonder if T.N.T. Clark's. Let's see. He might cite it. If I could find it for you real quick, I will. But that might be a resource you might want to look at. I thought it was by De Silva or somebody that you would know the name. And now I can't find it. I'll have to look for it for you at home. So remind me next chill stream when I'm at home and I'm on my regular computer. I will see if I can hunt that down for you. But commentaries will give you that information. Yeah, boy, I wish I could. I just can't bring it up on my laptop here. So, good question. It's generally not. I think it's third Maccabees is very disconnected from first and second, and like I said, it's third. It's called third only because it follows first and second. It's not because it's part of anything to do with the Maccabean revolt. Yeah, yeah. Um, Opening commentary on Second Maccabees even says that Maccabean martyrs are more effectively told in Fourth Maccabees than Second Maccabees. It was overly dismissive of Second Maccabees. Yeah, that's kind of weird. It's like I said, it's more like a philosophical treatise on suffering, and it uses the martyrs of Second Maccabees. So it's much more expansive. I don't think it's better, quite frankly. Um, the interesting thing about Fourth Maccabees is it doesn't mention the resurrection of the body, which is precisely what Second Maccabees emphasizes. That's the reason why they were martyrs, is because they they believed they'd be resurrected again. So they kind of missed the big point. So what are we going to talk about today for the chill stream, guys? Well, by the way, thanks for those comments and questions. Those are very interesting stuff. We're going to continue our dive in Romans. We went over some really fascinating material with Romans 9. I hope you guys like that. Um, Showing a whole collection of usage of Deuterocanonical books by Paul in Romans 9, which is kind of interesting because Romans 9 is, I think, the favorite chapter for Reformed theologians. We're going to move on. We're going to look at chapters 12 and 13. Now, again, I'm going through New Testament use of the Deuterocanon. Not all of these are really important. Some of them are just interesting connections. So some will, I think, have a lot of probative weight to show that, yeah, these books are authoritative. Others not. But like I said, there's some, each one of these things, for me, I find fascinating. So I'm just going to share it with you. Oh, yes. Yes. I have read that too. Yeah. Yeah, Third Maccabees begins weird. It begins with a conjunction. Uh, so it could be. You're right. Uh, but yes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just that. Remind me, ask me again. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to take myself off the screen. I'm dealing with a really small screen here. I got the big screens at home, which is really nice. So I got to get close to the screen to actually read all this stuff. So read sometime. Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't mention the resurrection, the bodily resurrection. All it does is talk about immortality, but it doesn't mention the resurrection. And that's an important point. The reason I know that is because when I treated Hebrews 11:35b with the Maccabean martyrs being mentioned by the author of Hebrews, I one of the designations for that group is that they accepted torture, refused release for the sake of a better resurrection. And that last line rules out the possibility that it's talking about the Maccabean martyrs in fourth Maccabees, because it doesn't mention the bodily resurrection, but second Maccabees does. So that's why I did a study on that, and it doesn't mention it. Okay, so we're going to go over Romans 12:15. Actually, we're going to do two passages today for our chill stream. And they're short and sweet ones, but Interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Okay, so what is Romans 12:15? It's this dictum that Paul gives. And he says, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And where is Paul getting this? Right? Is this something that he's just inspired by the Holy Spirit to say? Or is he drawing from Old Testament source, like Proto-canonical book or Deuterocanonical book? Well, I'm glad you asked the question, because it appears that he's drawing from Sirach. And there is the lexical connections between the two. Again, I color code it for you guys who don't know Greek. So you can see the yellow words are in Greek, the same word, and in blue, the same word. Fairly close. I mean, there are a couple of lexical connections with the word weep and with. But, even more than that, there's the obvious thematic connection. Sirach 7:34 says, avoid not those who weep, but mourn with those who mourn. Basically, the exact same thought Paul has. And in terms of words, I mean, it's almost the same expression. You could almost say this is a quotation. It's pretty darn close to it. It's like an accommodated quote. And if you don't know what an accommodated quote is, basically, when you're quoting something, not formally, but informally, sometimes you have to change it a little bit so that it fits the context. So we see this all the time being used in the New Testament, where it doesn't quote word for word what's in the Old Testament. Sometimes it'll tweak it a little bit so that it reads naturally within the narrative, right? So there isn't any jarring switches from first to second or second to third person or something like that. And that's what this appears to be, is a accommodated quote from Sirach 7:34. And it's interesting because that's kind of a moral um, dictum, right? He's commanding Christians to do this, and he seems to be drawing this from Sirach. Now, let's go to the commentaries, as we do in these chill streams when we're looking at New Testament stuff. And here we have the Greek for rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. And let's see. So James Dunn says an example of the imperatival infinitive, much used by Homer, also Philippians 3:16. Then he says, this is the first of a sequence of exhortations where Paul draws on the maxims of traditional Jewish tradition. So he says Paul is drawing from this tradition. So what tradition is he drawing from? Here, the closest parallel is Sirach 7:34, and then it gives the Greek and the English. So Dunn says Paul is actually drawing from Jewish tradition, quote unquote, right? Because Dunn is a Protestant, right? He's not going to say he's drawing from Scripture. And he says the closest that we have is Sirach 7:34, and that's absolutely right. It's almost word for word, right? So that's actually a pretty strong admission, right? That it seems like Paul is dependent upon Sirach for this dictum. He also says, see also Job 30:25 of the Septuagint. And then it has Philo and other rabbinic sources for rabbinic parallels. But obviously, Job is the only one that could be the possible source material for Paul, because the rabbinic stuff is late, and Philo is contemporary, so he couldn't be quoting Philo, which leaves Job 30:25 as a possible source. And what does Job 30:25 in the Septuagint say? It says, I myself wept over each of the poor and lamented seeing a man in distress. And it has the word wept there, but that's a pretty common word. But you can see here that Job doesn't align with what Paul's saying, right? There isn't this dictum to mourn with those who mourn. Job just says that he wept with other people. So very unlikely that Paul's drawing upon Job. So what's he drawing upon? Well, apparently Sirach, right? So for those who say there's no quotation, I guess that depends on what you mean by quotation, right? If you mean like a direct word for word quotation, no, Paul does not quote directly word for word from a Deuterocanonical book, but it appears that he does make accommodated quotations or loose quotations from the Deuterocanon. And I think this is an example of it. Let's see, this is the exegetical commentary of the Epistle to Romans. It says, but that requires more of a high Christian temper to rejoice with them that do rejoice than to weep with those who weep. For this nature itself fulfills perfectly, and there is none so hard-hearted as not to weep over that which is a calamity. But the other requires a more noble soul, so so as not to keep from envying, but even to feel pleasure with a person who is in esteem. And this is why we placed it first. For it is for there is nothing that ties love so firmly as sharing both joy and pain with one another. Then, interesting enough, this commentator quotes Saint John Chrysostom, who in turn is quoting Sirach 7:34. So very interesting that he brings up Chrysostom in relation to this verse. Now here we have Lang's commentary. Um, Lang basically says, rejoice with those who rejoice. As on infinitives as imperatives, see Weiner or Wiener. Meyer fills out the sentence with, goes on in Greek, the infinitive as an imperative to be supplemented mentally with the corresponding verb. See, get this, Sirach 7:33-34. So Lang sees this text as being behind Paul's dictum in Hebrews 12. And it says, verse 14 defines the proper conduct in relation to personal antipathy. Verse 15, the proper conduct in relation to personal sympathy. Okay, so Lang sees a connection with Sirach. And again, this commentary, that's Lang, Schaff, and Hurst, it's definitely a Protestant commentary. Yet, nevertheless, sorry, that was the chair, that wasn't me. Nevertheless, you can see the connection here. Harper Biblical Commentary says verse 9 through 13 appear to focus on relationships within the community, and 14 through 21 on external ones. But even this distinction is tenuous. More illuminating is the sudden increase of echoes and reminiscences of identifiable traditions. Okay, so it's saying within these sections in Romans, we can identify certain traditions that Paul is drawing from. And what are those traditions? Of the Jesus tradition in verse 14, Matthew 5:44, or verses 17 through 21, Matthew 5:39, of Deuteronomy 32:35, and verse 19:8, or verse 19b, excuse me. Now notice, of Jewish wisdom traditions in verse 15, there we have Sirach 7:34, 16, Proverbs 3:7, verse 17, Proverbs 3:4, and verse 20, Proverbs 25. Now, this is interesting that James May would say that what's illuminating is these echoes and reminiscences, they're identifiable traditions. In other words, in the series of verses, Paul is tapping into previous tradition that we can identify. So this isn't something nebulous or, something that we really don't have assurance where he's getting this stuff. No, he says we can identify it. You have the Jesus tradition, then you have the quote unquote Jewish wisdom tradition, right? i.e. the Deuterocanon or the wisdom literature. And Sirach is 415, just like we saw. Commentary on New Testament use in the Old Testament also recognizes this. The pattern of obedience remains the same. The exhortation to rejoice with those who rejoice, 12:15, has a parallel in Sirach 7:34. Do not neglect those who weep and mourn with those who mourn. So there you go. So these commentators are recognizing the connection here, right? That Paul's dictum to mourn with those who mourn comes from the book of Sirach. And here we have the critical and exegetical handbook of the Epistle of Romans. And after giving the Greek and talking about the Greek, it says, on the subject matter, compare Ecclesiasticus 7:34. So it points to Sirach 7:34. And then rightly Chrysostom brings into prominence the fact that weep, and it goes on to quote Chrysostom in Greek. You gotta love those old commentaries, right? You have to know Greek and Latin because they just quote the primary sources in the original languages. So not exactly good for a beginner, but it's helpful, right? So anyway, so here we have the commentators all see these connections. What about our friends, the Protestant cross references? Now, if you guys are new to the chill stream, when I'm looking at New Testament text and its use of the Deuterocanon, this is kind of the pattern I've been doing. First, I analyze the text looking at lexical connections, thematic connections. So it could point to a possible dependency that these New Testament authors are using the Deuterocanonical books that Protestant calls Apocrypha. Then I go to commentaries because the commentaries also will recognize those connections. And then usually at the end, I go to Protestant Bibles. And people might not know this, but Protestant Bibles used to contain the Deuterocanon in a subsection called the Apocrypha. And when Protestant Bibles had the Apocrypha there, they also included cross references. So even though they're Protestant publishers, Protestant editors, they included cross references to and from the so-called Apocrypha to the New Testament text, which I think is very telling, right? It shows that the earliest Protestants understood that the Deuterocanon was integral to understanding the New Testament. And in fact, it's somewhat of an admission that the New Testament authors were utilizing these books. And that's something that a lot of Protestant apologists today would deny. Yeah, you'll commonly see on websites and sometimes even hear Protestant apologists say the New Testament never uses the Deuterocanon, never uses the Apocrypha. It's totally foreign to New Testament thought. They try to make it seem like some weird oddball text that has no connection with Christianity, when in fact the earliest Bibles had cross references. They were actually telling their Protestant readers, look this up because you'll see a connection here. So here we have the Coverdale Bible, 1535. That has a cross reference from Sirach 7 to Romans 12. We have the Great Bible, 1541, again from Sirach to Romans. We have the Taverner's Bible, 1551, again from Sirach to Romans. And I actually didn't, this is from my logos, so I cheated, guys. Sorry. It was just quicker to do this. So I just did a little snippet, screen shot of the Geneva 1560. Sirach verse 34 has a reference to Romans 12:15. And here we go back to Geneva Bible 1583. So you have several editions of the Geneva Bible has the cross reference here. And also we have the King James Bible but this is uh, the Blaney edition of the King James from 1769. Blaney and Kahn have a lot more references, cross references. So the King James 1611 doesn't have it, but later versions of King James does have, as you can see here, a cross reference from Sirach to Romans. So yeah, so that's our little treatment of mourn with those who mourn, right? Something you probably read a whole bunch of times in your lifetime, and we're familiar with that. You are familiar with this, but maybe you didn't know the Deuterocanonical connection. Now, what does this say about Sirach? Did Paul believe Sirach to be inspired authoritative scripture because he uses it? I would say this one's kind of a draw. I don't think you could look at this and say, there's no doubt he uses it as authoritative inspired scripture. I don't think you can do that, but it would be weird for him to give this dictum, drawing from Sirach, if it weren't a sacred text, right? It would be strange. So, probative weight, maybe not a lot, but it, it would be odd if it wasn't. Let's put it that way. Okay? And there's a lot of references like this in the New Testament. I just found that one to be interesting because it almost comes to the level of a loose quotation. And there's other ones too, by the way. So let's go to our second text. By the way, if you have any questions, please put it up in your chat area. And again, this is a chill stream. That's why I'm talking softly so I don't wake up everyone in the hotel. I'm actually down here in Steubenville, Ohio for the St. Paul Center's Applied Biblical Studies Conference. It's going to be on the Jubilees, which is going to be a lot of fun. And Dr. Bergman is going to be the keynote speaker this morning. So we're going to be heading over to the conference later on. And it's a lot of fun. So if you love scripture and you want to go to a conference of good, solid Catholic biblical scholarship, check it out. If you can't come this year, come next year. So far, so good. All right. And I know, by the way, for the chill streams, I know we get a lot of people from Australia and Europe and Africa. So obviously, that would be a trip for you guys. But there's no excuse for those in America. Good conference. They also have an outstanding conference right after this. This is Wednesday through Friday. And Friday through Saturday is the Defending the Faith conference, which, if you're into apologetics in America, this is kind of like the Catholic Mecca for Catholic apologetics, is the Franciscan University of Steubenville's summer conference, Defending the Faith conference, which I've been attending for years. And it's a lot of fun. I won't be doing it this year, though. So, by the way, if anybody's watching this chill stream and you're going to the conference, look me up. If you see me in the hallway or something, say, hey, it'd be great to meet you in person. Okay, let's go to our next passage, which is just a chapter later, interesting enough. Romans 13:1. This one we're going to have to do a little bit more work with, but again, it's one of those things, it's interesting to see. So what is 13:1? Paul says, quote, "Let every person be subordinate to the higher authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been established by God." And there's the Greek for you guys from the Nestle Aland. So where does Paul get this idea that there's no, like kings, magistrates, those type of people, they have no authority except what is given to them by God? Well, I'm glad you asked that question because that's the subject of this chill stream, right? One candidate, and probably the most likely candidate, I think, is the Book of Wisdom, chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. And that says, Hear therefore, kings, and understand, learn, you magistrates of the earth's expanse. Hearken, you who are in power over the multitude and lord over it in the throngs of people. Now, here's the money verse right here. Because authority has been given to you by the Lord, and sovereignty by the Most High, who shall probe your works and scrutinize your counsels. Okay, so that is, you can see thematically, right, is aligns almost perfectly with Paul. God is the one who gives the authority to sovereigns, to kings and the people in authority. Um, by the way, as I was reading this, it also reminded me, uh, wisdom's point here is that kings need to rule righteously because their authority is given to them by God, and God is going to scrutinize their counsels because of it. And Paul makes a similar point, by the way, with teachers, right? He says, not many should be teachers because you'll be judged more strictly. So it's kind of interesting. There's also that parallel thought between Wisdom 6 and Paul's application to teachers, right? But anyway, there's something here we have to note. Okay, there is a little bit of a wrinkle. I think thematically this aligns so closely with Paul. I think it's definitely a candidate for wisdom actually being the source he's drawing from. But lexically, it matches up kind of, but it's not a lock. For example, for Paul, he uses the word exousia for authority. Okay. However, wisdom uses a different word translated authority. So the English translation kind of throws us off here. It translates both words as authority, but they're slightly different in Greek. They're not the same word. Exousia means power, authority, and wisdom uses uh, kratesis, which is right here. Kratesis. And I just give you a little snippet from my lexicons on logos, which gives you a little summary of each lexicon. And as you can see here, kratesis means might, power, dominion, conquest, performance, mastery, title of possession, ascension to the throne, retention, strengthening. It, authority would be similar, right? You could see a semantic overlap between kratesis and exousia, authority, and this. And that's why the English translator translated kratesis as authority. But it has that nuance that you don't see too much with authority, exousia. So lexically, it's close, but not exact. And there are other passages that are possible background text for this too. So there's other candidates as well. For example, the two closest ones are from the proto-canonical books of Proverbs and Daniel. So Proverbs 8:15 says, "By me kings reign and lawgivers establish justice." I think that comes close to a background text for Paul. And also Daniel 2:21 says, "He causes the changes of the times and seasons and makes kings and unmakes them." Now Daniel 2:21 I don't think is likely a background text, just because the thought is a bit more distant than Paul's. Like Paul isn't talking about who establishes people as kings and dethrones them, namely God. That's not his point. His point is that their authority is an investment by God. So I think we can rule out Daniel 2:21. Proverbs 8:15 is possible. By me kings reign. But here again is a different word. In Greek, for those who can read Greek, you'll see that it's a form of king. So you have Basileus and then Basilusian, which is basically reign. It's the verbal form of king, basically. Third person plural indicative, I think. So it, by me, kings become kings. I guess you could probably put it in English. So it doesn't quite align as closely as wisdom, in my humble opinion, but it's not bad. It's in the ballpark, I think. Uh, let's see. Yes, there is definitely a semantic overlap. Both terms translate Hebrew concept. Yep, exactly. Yeah, so I think it's it's close enough, right? It's close enough for horseshoes and grenades and biblical lexical connections, but it's not locked though. It's not the same word. Now, interesting enough, let's move to the next slide. There is another text that can also be a possible background text, and that's also Sirach 10:4. Okay, so you have two Deuterocanonical possible background texts. Now, this one says, 10:4 says, and by the way, what a great reference, right? Easy to remember, 10:4. Like 10:4 good buddy for those who grew up in the 70s, you know what I'm talking about. The government of the earth is in the hands of the Lord, and over it he will raise the right man for the time. Now, as you can tell, the meaning doesn't very closely align with Paul. It doesn't explicitly say God gives authority to the rulers of the earth, but it kind of, in a roundabout way, does. What's interesting is the word translated government here is exousia, the same Greek word Paul uses in Romans 13:1, authority. Okay, so what do we do with this? It's like there's two possible deuterocanonical contenders here, in my opinion. I think Proverbs is a distant third. Um, Sirach lexically aligns closer with Paul, but in its meaning, it's not very good alignment. It's very roundabout, and maybe it doesn't seem like it's directly drawing from Sirach. On the other hand, it seems like Paul is drawing from Wisdom 6 because the meaning is very close. The only problem is verbally, it's not a lock like Sirach, but it's in the ballpark, right? So remember, we're always looking at lexical connections. Did they use the same words or similar words? That would be an indicator that one is using another text. And also thematic alignment. Is the expression essentially the same, or how close it aligns with Paul? Those two indicators are kind of split. It's like lexically Sirach's closer, but thematically wisdom's closer. So what do we do? Well, for Catholics and Orthodox, it's an interesting question. For someone who doesn't believe Sirach or wisdom is inspired, it's kind of an uncomfortable question, right? And you'd probably opt for Proverbs, even though Proverbs, I think, is a less likely candidate, but it is possible, right? Okay, so we broke down the text for you. Any questions, by the way, before we jump into the commentaries? Just put them up there on the chat room. And by the way, guys, do us a favor, like, subscribe, hit the bell. Also, support our ministry if you can financially. One way to do that is through memberships. We appreciate it. We got tons of members, and we're slowly rolling out members-only content. So as a thank you for your support. So you guys are awesome, and we appreciate all of your prayers. And if you can, through memberships, we appreciate it. Also, William Albrecht and myself are on Patreon. So thank you so much, guys. Now, with that commercial break, I don't see any questions in the comment sections. So let's go to the biblical commentary, shall we? And here we have the word biblical commentary. By the way, as a series, I think is a very good biblical commentary. So if you're going to shell out a few $100 for a Protestant commentary on Scripture, This would be the first one I would pick up. In fact, I owned it for a number of years before it even came out on Logos. It says, although the changing identity of the people of God, no longer simply Jews identified in ethnic categories, was part of the problem, and then cites right on the Messiah, Paul again draws here on the sound political wisdom of an Israel tested by oppression and dispersion. For example, verses 1:4, Wisdom of Solomon 6:3-4, to counsel a policy of political quietism. Now, James Dunn actually did it, guys. He actually used the word draws. In other words, he's dependent on, he's using Wisdom 6. And this is just part of several texts that Paul is utilizing, right? And so that's a pretty strong admission by Dunn. Now, if that weren't enough, later, that's page 759 in this volume, he says this: for there is no authority except given by God, and the powers that have been established by God. Here again, Paul draws on the resources of Jewish wisdom. See particularly, and then he quotes some articles. Then he goes to Proverbs 8:15-16. By me, kings reign and rulers decree what is just. And then notice what he quotes. Wisdom of Solomon 6:3 reminds boastful rulers, your dominion was given to you by the Lord and your sovereignty from the Most High. Similarly, Sirach 10:4 and 17:17. Then it has the epistle of Aristeas, which likely wouldn't be a dependent text, and Josephus, which definitely wouldn't be a dependent text because it was written after Paul wrote this. So Dunn, he's actually using the word drawing on resources, and among those things he drew on, Wisdom of Solomon 6:3, Sirach 10:4, and as you know, James D.G. Dunn. I don't think he's alive. I think he recently passed away, didn't he? But he admits, hey, Paul's using this, and of course he doesn't. He makes it Jewish wisdom, but he also includes Proverbs in Jewish wisdom. So very interesting stuff, right? Very interesting stuff. I hope you guys are liking this. And that's it for the commentaries, believe it or not. I didn't find much on this. But I did find cross-references. So let's go to the cross-references, shall we? So you have Coverdale Bible 1535. Now, notice this. Here we have a reciprocal cross-reference. So you have in wisdom, in Romans 13, you have a cross-reference to wisdom. And then you have in wisdom a cross-reference to Romans. So it's reciprocal. That is significant. Then you have the Great Bible 1541. Again, notice it has the list of wisdom. Then you have Jugg's Tyndale Bible, New Testament, 1552. Notice wisdom is there. Also, in Geneva Bible, New Testament, 1557, we have wisdom here. And this threw me off, guys. I don't know why the prayer did this, but notice that instead of giving a W, they have two V's. So I actually missed this a couple of times because it looked to my eyes to say Visd 6. And I was thinking it must be some document or something, Visd, what's that? And then it occurred to me that it's actually a W that's split into two V's. So fun stuff, right? Dealing with old Bibles. And Bishop's Bible, 1568. Notice here, Wisdom 6. So this is in Romans, referring the Protestant reader back to wisdom. Then you have the Spanish Bearer Bible, 1569. And we have reciprocal cross references both in Romans and Wisdom. And also the Kingeth Jameth 1611, the original. We have in Wisdom cross reference to Romans, but not reciprocal. So if you're reading Romans, you wouldn't see a reference back. Geneva Bible 1583, we have again cross references to Wisdom. And then I threw this in because I try to throw in early church fathers. Origen actually quotes from this passage. And actually, this is a quote from Sirach. This is in his work against Celsus. And Celsus, by the way, if you're not familiar with this work, oh, really? I didn't know that. Hey, SoCal, it's great to have you with us, by the way. By the way, guys, let's support SoCal's channel and also Reason and Belief. They're friends of the channel. They do great work. And so check out Reason and Belief. Check out SoCal, Preston, Tony L., and Sam Shamoon, of course. And support our brothers. Like, subscribe, do all that stuff. It's doing some great research. So anyway, Origen, he's writing against Celsus. Celsus is a pagan and an anti-Christian pagan. And he's one of the great opposers to Christianity in the early church. Okay. So Origen's responding to him. And it says, Celsus goes on to say, we must not obey the ancient writer who said long ago, let one be king whom the son of the crafty Saturn appointed. And adds, if you set aside this maximum, you will deliberately suffer, for it is at the hands of the king. For if all were to do the same as you, there would be nothing to prevent his being left in utter solitude and desertion, and the affairs of the earth would would fall into the hands of the wildest and most lawless barbarians, and then there would be no longer remain among men any of the glory of your religion or of true wisdom, unquote. So he's quoting Celsus. If then, quote, there shall be one Lord, one King, unquote, he must be not the man, quote, whom the son of the crafty Saturn appointed, unquote, but the man to whom he gave the power who, quote, removeth kings and setteth up kings, unquote, and who, quote, now this is from Sirach, raise up useful man in the time of need upon earth, unquote. For kings are not appointed by the son of Saturn, who, according to Grecian fable, hurled his father from his throne and sent him down to Tartarus, whatever interpretation may be given to the allegory, but by God, who governs all things and who wisely arranges whatever belongs to the appointment of kings. So you can see Origen kind of riffing off Paul, but also quoting from the book of Sirach in the process of riffing off Paul. Now, there's one last thing I want to show you that's very interesting. Yeah, the Bart Ehrman of the church century. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's very interesting work. I want to show you this. Remember the possible background text? Let's see here. Here we go. Remember how we talked about, Proverbs and Daniel? And I think if I were non-Catholic and I didn't accept the Deuterocanon, I think I would automatically say Paul must have used Proverbs 8:15 because obviously that's scripture and there's no dispute over Proverbs and it comes pretty darn close to what Paul's saying. So who cares what it says in Wisdom or Sirach? Proverbs most definitely would be Paul's source. That's what I would say if I didn't accept it. Deuterocanon, okay, or the so-called Apocrypha. Because after all, it's proto-canonical, why not? Well, I want you to notice something. I want you to look at the cross references in all these Bibles and notice that none of them give any text. They don't give Proverbs. They don't give Daniel. They only give wisdom, right? They don't even give a secondary cross reference. Like, for example, you have wisdom and then you have First Peter. And then here you have wisdom. Oh, it's hard to read. John, two from John. Then here we just have wisdom. Here we have wisdom, Titus, First Peter. Here we have wisdom in John. Here we have wisdom, Titus, First Peter. Here we just have Romans, wisdom, Titus, First Peter. Okay? Isn't it interesting that none of these Protestant Bibles considered Proverbs as a possible background text, and they only highlight wisdom? I found that to be fascinating, right? Why wouldn't they? After all, if close is good enough and Proverbs is kind of close, wouldn't you put Proverbs and maybe as a secondary text put wisdom? Yet these Protestant authors, editors, right, of these Bibles, it seems like wisdom was the only thing that popped on their radar screen. So I find that fascinating, right? Now, again, that doesn't prove anything, but I think it shows that the the case we did when we broke down the lexical connections and thematic connections, I think was pretty solid, and it seems to align with how early Protestants saw it, despite the fact that they kind of downgraded the so-called Apocrypha to sub-canonical status. They nevertheless saw that connection. Okay, so that brings us to the end. Let's see here. Remove from screen and put myself up here. Not that you need to see me, but if you have questions or comments, let's open it up for questions or comments. So Cal Preston, he says, I just dropped a new video on the Trinity, and I challenge those defending the Trinity to use Deuterocanonical Apocrypha. I hope you can check it out. I'd love to. Yeah, I have to check it out. I don't know if I can till the weekend, probably. So hopefully I can put it on my watch list and check out the video. Sounds interesting. So, SoCal, were you using the Apocrypha for establishing Trinitarian points? Is that what you're doing? Or that's what it sounds like to me. Just waiting for your answer real quick. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, it's loaded, right? Let me guess. You used a lot of wisdom and a lot from Sirach 24, because that's where I would go. Um, there's a lot of really cool stuff. You know, people, you don't realize that the so-called Apocrypha was written very close to the time of Jesus, and there was a lot of theological development that went on, doctrinal development within Judaism during those years. So when we're reading Deuterocanonical text, you're kind of listening in on theological discussions right before Jesus comes on the scene. And, you know, that's where some things that are implicit in the proto-canonical books sometimes become more explicit in deuterocanonical books. Although you can definitely get the Trinity from proto-canonical books, like it's there in the Old Testament. And if you are interested in that, I recommend Sam Shamoun's channel, Shamounian. He's done remarkable work in the Trinity and the Old Testament. But deuterocanonical books, they make their contribution, and some very important ones at that. So let's see here. SoCal Preston says, it took me a long time to make because I added questions and asked during Trinitarian debates on F, SFT, so that you may see questions in that. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, it sounds like it. Sounds like a great video. So guys, go over to SoCal Preston's channel, check it out. And, they can do all that stuff, get that to jump up on the algorithm for people to see. Let's see here. Hollywood Big Boss says, to me, Ben Sira finishes what Psalms and Proverbs started. The relationship between God and man in those books gets closer and closer until Jesus makes his appearance. Oh, that's a cool observation. I could see that. Yeah, especially Proverbs. Yeah, good stuff. Sirach's just got lots of good practical wisdom. But it's interesting, he will swerve into some pretty deep water in terms of the nature of God, relationship of us to God, and in the idea of God's wisdom, right? It really develops this idea of God's wisdom being God and yet somehow distinct from God. And somehow, even with Sirach, what's fascinating is God's wisdom comes down to earth and dwells with men in the Torah. And also in the temple. And it's lots of fascinating thoughts there. In fact, I can't remember his name. I sat in a course with, I can't think of Marty. Oh, boy, the name slips me. But I took a course from this gentleman. He was a convert from Judaism, and he had several doctorates in biblical studies. And he was convinced that Ben Sira was at the very heart of John's prologue. Sirach 20, no, not Marty McFly. Brenner? I can't remember exactly. It was like Brenner, maybe. See, Scott Hahn would know. I should ask him. I took the class with this guy. I don't even remember his name, but I'm sure Scott knows off the top of his head. But very, very well studied biblicist, theologian. And he was convinced that John was utilizing Sirach 24 in his prologue because there's several points of contact that several things that John puts together that could only come together if you have wisdom in mind. Let's see here. I have to look at the video. It was an Old Testament, particularly Sodom and Gomorrah, made some of the biggest difference in my mother and sibling went to the Jehovah's Witnesses. You mean they came out of the Jehovah's Witnesses because of that? Or it drove them to the Jehovah's Witnesses? I think I know what you're talking about with Sodom and Gomorrah, because it says that the Lord called down, was it sulfur and brimstone from the Lord in heaven? So there's a Lord on earth and a Lord in heaven. And that's right after the three mysterious visitors with Abraham. Psalms address the nation of Israel. Proverbs expands the Psalms. Left off. Ben Sira is God the Father speaking directly to son and daughter. Yeah. Beautiful book. Yes, absolutely. Is Gary doing okay? Well, Denzel, I don't know. Am I? I hope so. By the way, Denzel, if you missed it, I'm actually not in the dojo. I am in a hotel room doing a chill stream on my laptop. So that's why I'm probably talking very softly, and the picture might not be as good as at home. So hopefully it's coming in clear and understandable. So yeah, and by the way, my wife, I want to give you guys an update, praise report. Thank you so much for your prayers for my wife's recovery from knee replacement surgery. Surgery went great, and her recovery is they're very, very happy. She's actually ahead of schedule as far as recovery is going. She's doing things that she probably shouldn't be doing, but she's out and about, and the pain level is manageable. Thanks be to God, because it was really rough, especially the first week after knee replacement, which I've heard from several people. It's among the most painful recoveries for surgery. So I know your prayers have been immensely effective, and I just want to thank you and praise God for that. So thank you for your prayers, guys. You've done well. Please keep her, consider it in her prayers so that she's completely recovered. And that affects me because I couldn't do a lot of stuff um, because I had to take care of her. So I couldn't do the research and do as much live streaming as I wanted. But now that things are looking up, perhaps I can get back in the routine and we'll start cranking out some really cool material. Let's see. Yes, that's it. That is the text. Yes, Genesis 19:24. There's two Jehovahs, one on earth, one in heaven. Yep. Check it out, guys. It's a cool verse. And that's right on the heels of Jehovah visiting Abraham with the two visitors and eating with him and conversing with him. And very powerful idea of the two powers in heaven idea. And Sam Shamoon, second to none in presenting all that material. So I always direct people to Shamoonian and just go to his YouTube channel, do a search. You could do Sodom and Gomorrah, or at two powers in heaven or something like that, and he can expound on that stuff. He is so good in that area. Let's see. Glad to hear the update on wife's recovery. Yeah, still praying. Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that. She does as well. She told me to thank you guys, let you know that she's doing well. And I mean, you can see the effectiveness of prayer. Let's see. Although the Wisdom of Solomon, okay, here. So Hollywood Big Boss says, although the Wisdom of Solomon is my favorite Old Testament book, far as the proper interpretation of Genesis and Exodus, this book is worth its weight in gold. Yes, it is very important. The expansion on all sorts of details about the Exodus that are implicit in the other texts, but it becomes explicit. Lots of cool stuff. One thing that's really cool is the manna in wisdom. The manna turns out to be it looks like ice. It is mysterious. It tastes like whatever you delight in. And if you go to Numbers, I think it's Exodus or Numbers, it already has mysterious properties, right? The manna melts in the sunlight. You have to take a double portion of manna for the Sabbath, and there's no manna on the Sabbath. But you can bake it into bread, but it melts in the sunlight. It looks like crystal, according to wisdom, and it tastes like whatever you delight in. And by the way, that's where we get the divine praises, the line, "You have given us bread from heaven." And then the response is, "Having all sweetness within it." That line, "having all sweetness within it," comes from wisdom. So you didn't know it, but when you're singing divine praises for Eucharistic adoration, you're actually singing a line from wisdom. How about that? Denzel, okay. Join it. You look like you're crying. I didn't know something was wrong. Do I? It's probably because I'm in this hotel room with a weird lamp, and I have an extreme close-up because my laptop, I'm actually kind of far away from my laptop. So I look like I have a 30-foot big head in the screen. Awesome. Bubbles. All right. Yes. Yes. Recovering ahead of schedule. Yeah. But thanks, Denzel. I appreciate it. I wasn't sure what to make of your comment. It's completely magical, including Sirach. Yeah. It's Wisdom is one of my favorite books of the whole Bible. Um, although I did an interview yesterday for Emmaus Academy, which is a bunch of online courses. You guys should check it out. Emmaus Academy has some amazing video courses. In fact, William Albrecht did a course on purgatory for them, but they have like dozens of courses on all sorts of topics. Yeah, I did one on my book, Gospel Truth, and they interviewed me, and they asked me what was my favorite Bible text, and I said, it's kind of like asking, what's your favorite child? Which child do you love the most? It's like you love all the children, right? It's just some days you might love one more than another, but you love them all, right? So I love the Book of Wisdom. I love all biblical books, but wisdom, wisdom every now and then, it's just such a beautiful book. That and Hebrews, my favorite New Testament book. Not that you asked, but it is. Let's see. It's crazy that wisdom was written only 100 years before Jesus. Truly shows God had a plan that the adversary cannot overcome. Yeah, yeah, it is pretty mind blowing. Um, Especially wisdom too, with the prediction about the opposition to Jesus. I think, I think if you don't believe the Deuterocanon or the Apocrypha is part of Scripture, reading wisdom too, I don't see how a person can't walk away saying this is talking about Jesus. I just don't know how you could do that. And people have tried. I mean, Turchin Fan and Dan Chapa has a video out where they kind of try to weasel out of, I guess, or squint their eyes and try not to see Jesus in there. But I don't know how you can. It's kind of like the suffering servant. There is a group out there called One for Israel that is evangelical. Well, they're Messianic Jews, but they're really evangelicals. Um, they do outreach for Jews. And one of the tactics they'll use is they'll quote from Isaiah and the suffering servant. And they'll ask the Jews, who's this passage talking about? And the Jews usually think that they're quoting the New Testament. So say, obviously Jesus. And then there's the big unveil, right? It's like, no, this is Isaiah, right? Um, I think Catholics and Orthodox can do that with non-Catholics with wisdom too. Just read in wisdom too and say, who's it talking about? And I think any Bible Christian would say, it's talking about Jesus. But, this is the book of wisdom. It was written long before Jesus came on the scene. And so that was, I think wisdom too is just as revealing as the suffering servant songs, excuse me. I don't know what you guys think, but that's my humble opinion. Okay, last call for questions before we shut down the chill stream. I think. Let's see. I think William did a video on what the father saw wisdom too. It's undeniable. Yeah, sounds like some William would do. He's the patristic guys. See, he goes into the early church fathers. Wisdom 2 sold me on the book being sacred scripture. It's far too on the nose and too close to the actual events that happened, not to be prophecy of Jesus and his suffering. Yeah, I totally see that. Yeah, it's remarkable, and what's remarkable too about it is like the suffering servant songs. It's a long text that you have all these points of contact with the New Testament. It's not just a one-off, like this verse kind of sounds like Jesus, or these two verses kind of sound like Jesus. It's like practically the whole chapter sounds like the opposition that Jesus had, and kind of a a roundabout way of describing his ministry, right? In fact, in my book, Case for the Deuterocanon, I actually take chapter 2 and I put in New Testament references that connect the charges that the wicked people make against the just one. And it's surprising how many New Testament texts, like, basically pick up the same thought, right? Like, one of the lines in Wisdom 2 is he censures our thoughts. And like, there's so many texts in the Gospels where Jesus knew the thoughts of the crowd, right? And he rebukes them. Um, Little connections like that. It's just one after another. So I honestly I don't see how somebody could not read Wisdom 2 and not walk away saying, this has to be prophetic. Yeah. So absolutely. And if you want more info on that, I did a video on Matthew 27:43 and its connection to Wisdom 2:18. That's a chill stream, guys. I think I did a couple of chill streams for it, and I go a little bit in depth, but not as much as I do in my book. So, yeah, Wisdom 2 is what got me. I don't see how anyone could not. 2BF. Uh, I was a non-denom from evangelical, so maybe it made it so I was less apologetic and could let it speak. Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, yeah, that's especially that connection in Matthew too. Matthew 27:43. Not only do you have the whole chapter being so prophetic, but you actually have Matthew hearkening, or the chief priests, scribes, and elders utilizing 2:18 in the Gospels. So it's not merely like, wow, this sounds like it's prophetic, therefore it is. It's like, no, the New Testament even uses it in an interesting way. Okay, Fantastic Gamer 9000 Hammock says, what if the Protestant brings up Enoch and Jude being quoted as prophetic? How would one refute it if we argue canonicity off of prophecies? Well, yeah, that's it, just that we don't argue that way. But it's like one of those things that if you read it, you get it, right? And it doesn't really need argument. But you're right. I mean, Jude does quote Enoch, and he quotes it as a prophecy. So does that mean Enoch is prophetic? Well, that's actually a problem for Protestants, because if all you go by is New Testament, I honestly don't see how you can legitimately rule out Enoch as being part of the canon. But that's only if you construct to the New Testament. But once you go into the early church to see what was the received text from Jesus and the apostles, then you find out Enoch, although initially has some favorable reception, becomes very negative and is rejected very early on. But if you don't figure in the early church, I don't know how you can get rid of that connection with Enoch. So yeah, I wouldn't argue on you know the because it looks like it's prophecy, therefore it's canonical. I don't think you could do that. But I think if you watch my argument with Matthew 27:43, which I don't do the prophecy thing so much as whether or not it's revelatory, I think that's actually stronger than Jude's quote of Enoch, um, in my humble opinion, because it shows that they're utilizing this text as being revelatory, that God actually said this. And that's, oh, I'll let you read. Just do a search in the YouTube. By the way, I found out something from my friend Joe that apparently he tried searching the channel on his phone and it won't let him do it. He has to do it from the website. So I don't know if that's true, guys. Do you know if that's true? Like searching for a particular video on a channel. He said he couldn't do it on his iPhone. Nope, no response. Okay, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Okay, so anyway, yeah, I think it's I don't know why he would lie. So if you want to check videos, go on the website, YouTube, check out the channel, and do the search, and you'll come up with the videos. Yeah, it's a special app, and I use Clip Glider. Oh, okay, cool, very good. Last call for questions before I go. Uh, it's true, Gary. Okay, thank you, Joey. Oh, Joey, I haven't seen you in the chat room. Okay, guys, I think that's it for today. So I'm down here in Steubenville. I'll be heading up to Michigan Friday, and God willing, I'll be able to do another chill stream Saturday. Are we going to do a team stream Friday? Usually we do Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We do at 2 p.m. Eastern time here on the channel. I'm not sure. It's up to William and David. Hopefully they will. I've been encouraging them to do it. But they're busy guys, so I don't know if they'll be able to. Let's see. Actually, hold on. There's some important stuff here. Joey says that I use the browser on my phone, play the video, and then it's in my history, and I continue it with on the app. Oh, that's a great hack right there. Good. Oh, you just got here. Well, hey, welcome. Welcome. Yeah, always mixed up with on NS. Yeah. Okay, guys, I think that's it. So I hope you enjoyed today's chill stream. If you did, do me a favor, like, subscribe, do all that stuff. Hit the thumbs up. Tell your friends about the channel. Also, let's see. Well, let's come up with a word. How about to show everybody that you made it to the end of the show stream awake? If you could put in the chat room as you're flexing to the audience. Let's do the word mourn. How about that? MOURNE. Okay. And show everybody you made it to the end. I guess that's not a happy note to end on, but it kind of fits with the chill stream. So, all right. Yep. Thank you guys. You are awesome. That's right. Yep. It doesn't matter how you spell it. More is more. All right, guys. Until next time, God bless. Thank you for your prayers and take care.